Hello, my name is Liz Schlemer, and this is a video for IME 315, Financial Decision Making for Engineers. This particular video covers the overall process of calculating fully allocated costs. So when we look at the 5 areas that we're covering in this class, this particular video falls under cost of products. So the main thing we want to do is when we're looking at fully allocated costs, we're trying to find the dollars per unit calculation. So lots of times costs are tracked by expenses or checks you write or things you buy. But in this case, this particular process wants to figure out what the dollar per unit cost of a product is. And we often compare that to sales price. So if we look at the cost, we want to understand how that compares to what we're selling it for. And hopefully the cost is less than the selling price. Well, there's 3 areas when we look at fully allocated costs. The first is labor cost per unit, and you need to ask 2 questions about that. The first is, how long does it take to make this item? So we want to know the time that it takes for a person who's particularly making this product. How long does it take? And how much does that employee cost the company? Now you notice it says there cost the company and not paid, because we're going to look at all the particular costs that are over and above what you pay an employee. The next part of the 3 parts is material costs per unit. So in this case, you want to know what are the quantity of raw materials that's needed to make this product. So how many screws, how much aluminum, how much plastic, whatever it is that you put into it, you want to know the raw material and how much is necessary to make the product. This also includes any kind of waste that's produced when you are making a product. And then the next question is, how much does this raw material cost? So you want to understand that also. And then the third area is overhead. And this is sort of everything else. So what else is needed to make this product? And it's a little bit funny because there's some things in overhead that aren't included in this dollar per unit cost, but we'll talk about that more fully when we look at overhead cost in another video. So we want to include things like the cost of the machine, the rent, the supervisor's salary, all of the things that are in support of making that. And then hopefully this little bit at the top here, the difference between all of the 3 costs and the sales price, is the profit. So let's look at this in a little more detail. So how much do employees cost the company? So we have to look at what we actually pay them, plus any taxes that we pay. And there are federal and state taxes that are required by law that you pay an employee. Also, any kind of benefits you might give them or paid time off. Those need to be included also. And how long does it take? So this is where we're going to review, if you're an industrial engineer, you know how to do these from IME 223, that we look at, we just use a stopwatch study and say time studies to see how long it takes them. 2 other methods are work sampling and predetermined time standard, and you need to do this for each step in the process. So we look at material costs, like we want to know how many units, and a lot of it is a per unit analysis, pounds, gallons, inches. We also include the waste, the scrap, and if there's any kind of recycling of waste and scrap, and then also the cost of rework. And we do this for each raw material. We want to know the dollars per unit, and if there's any quantity discounts. We also want to understand the recycling of the revenue from recycling, and we do this for each raw material. And then in overhead, we want to know everything else, like what haven't you accounted for? And then the question is, how do you allocate that to the particular unit? So we have all these expenses like rent and machine costs, and how do you actually put that in a dollar per unit calculation? And that's what we will look at in overhead. So when we looked at these 3 areas, we compare that to sales price, and we can make decisions like what should the price of our item be, and how much money are we making per unit. And this is a good way of thinking about it, because much of what we do when we interface with the market is look at dollar per unit concepts. So this is the cost. This is a video on the overall fully allocated cost.